Hello, I'm Jackie Tantillo, host of the podcast, Should Have Listened to My Mother. If you're new to the show, thank you so much for joining us. I appreciate all of your support, your subscriptions, and your downloads, and it truly is a big help for us. And remember to tell a friend. Hopefully these stories can reawaken wonderful memories of your mom, or perhaps help you re-envision your childhood. This week, my guest is here to share his stories of his life journey of seeking, studying, and finding one's true self through exploring many things, including Catholicism, Marxism, drugs, Buddhism, mindfulness, compassion, the circus, and his mother, who had a very unconventional life. And we'll be talking about so much more. So I'm really glad you're here. And I'm really glad that Stephen Schettini, who's an author, a former Buddhist monk, and a TEDx speaker, is joining us on this edition of Should Have Listened to My Mother. Hi, Stephen.
Hi, Jackie. It's a pleasure to be here. Thanks for having me.
So when I somehow connected with you, one of the first things that I saw was the career, maybe temporary or not, I'm not certain, of what your parents were doing. I believe this was in Italy when they were in the circus.
Well, it wasn't actually Italy.
Oh, it was here?
No, it was in Europe. My
So tell
father,
us.
my father, Dad, ran away. Well, he didn't run away, but he left home very young to join his cousin, who was doing acts in South America. So this is back in the early 20th century, where people would still just go on the road, one or two people, they'd have an act and they'd sort of set it up by the side of the road and make a few bucks and move on.
Yeah.
And that's what he did. That's where he learned the trade. And he worked with his cousin. Blackerman he had an act with lions and snakes and alligators.
Wow.
And so that's where he learned his craft.
Yeah. Where did your mom and he meet?
My mom, she was 8 years younger, and she also wanted to leave home to join the circus, which she did. She was living just north of London, and it was just before the war, and they met in 1939, just a few months before the war began.
Mm-hmm.
And they became close. Mussolini joined in Hitler. The police came and rounded up all the Italians, put them in jail. They also rounded up the Germans and sent them back to Germany for some reason. I don't know why that is strange. Anyway, so my mother kept in touch with my father, and that's really where the romance blossomed.
And what was your mom doing as part of the act?
Oh, that was a different act. She was an acrobatic dancer.
Oh, so that wasn't with your dad?
No, she wasn't with my dad when she joined the circus. She joined it. She always wanted to be a dancer. Her father had gone through the First War, the Great War, and he was working in the post office, which he thought was heaven after what he'd been through. And he wanted his daughter to go to the post office, and she thought that was the most boring thing she could imagine. So she plied him and worked on him, and she got her way in the end, and she got to join the circus, and that's where the two met. Yeah.
So was she rebellious, or was that just a one-off thing that she decided to run off and go do what she wanted to do, or was that in her blood?
It was somehow in her blood. She didn't run away. She waited. She worked on her father until she got permission. But the permission was very grudging. He said, well, if you get a booking, then I'll let you go. And he was convinced that she would never get a booking because she was just a young girl. But she did. She got a booking in Blackpool, which was a big venue in those days. And he had to let her go.
And so no aspirations for higher education back then for her. She wanted to do her dance.
No, she wasn't interested in that. She wanted to enjoy her life.
Is that something that she didn't see her parents doing?
I think that's pretty much nail on the head, yeah.
Yeah.
That's exactly it. They didn't, her parents didn't have a great marriage. Her father, she had very mixed feelings about her father. She adored her mother, who died relatively young. Her father was cheating on her mother, and so
Mhm.
it was complicated, as all families are.
Sure.
And but she determined to do what she wanted, but at the same time, she was determined to get his permission, and she got it. It was good that way.
If you were to hear your mom's voice in your ear now, what what would she be saying? Is she proud of you? Would she commend you for the path that you've taken for your quest to find what
Yeah,
was meaningful to you?
certainly. She one of the other things that she did, in spite of her parents, was to become a Catholic. She really wanted that even when she was young, and it took her a lot of effort. And when she met my father, who was Italian, Calabrese from the south, very hard-headed, but he was not in the church anymore. He'd abandoned the church, and he basically considered any priest an object of ridicule. And so these two got together. She was an enthusiastic convert, and he was an enthusiastic atheist.
And she kept it up. She stuck with her choice.
She didn't just keep it up, she got him back in the church. So much that I consider the great torture of my life going to church, going to
Mm.
school. My teachers were nuns until I was 9, and priests and monks until I was 17.
Yeah.
So,
They have that reputation for doing that to many people, don't they? A ruler in hand.
yeah,
So are you your mother's son?
I think so. Yeah. I'm not sure my siblings would agree. Um, my father used to point to me, and whenever anything went wrong, whenever I did anything bad or I was caught, he would wag his finger at me and say, "You're just like me."
Ooh.
And I was really interested in that. Well, what does that mean? And when I asked him, he'd just say, "You're just like me." He never
Mm.
gave me an explanation. So mom tried to give me an explanation. She was the storyteller. And that's the thing I would thank her for today. And in fact, the conversation that you just suggested, if I heard a voice in my ear, we actually did have that conversation much later in her life when she was already in her 80s. I had finally settled down with my present wife, Caroline, and I was beginning to resemble a well-adjusted human being. And we had some great conversations then. And we let go of a lot of stuff. It was really wonderful.
Can
And
you
she
share
came to,
some specifics? I'm sorry to interrupt. Could you share some specifics just so we have an idea?
well, she came to some of my teachings here in Montreal. I was teaching mindfulness, and she came to a couple of the classes, and she had no idea what to expect, and she was very impressed. Not so much by me and what I said, but she was impressed by the fact that I had an audience.
Oh, not even the message.
Well, she liked the message.
Oh,
She was
okay.
always trying to find the remnants of the Catholic in me,
Yeah.
the good little boy. And she heard me talking about love and compassion and insight, and she thought that that was a good thing. It was certainly better than what I'd been doing before because I had run-ins with drugs, as you mentioned, also with stealing. I became a kleptomaniac in my final years of university, and I was very confused and very unsettled, very unhappy. Um, so she was glad to see me pass through that, come out the other end. Yeah.
Did you spend, when you were a teenager or a young boy, did your mom have an idea that you were struggling with things back then and try and have one-on-one conversations with you, or was it a free for all?
Not the same sort of one-on-one conversations that modern parents might have with their children.
Mm-hmm.
Um, in fact, later on, when I told her I was seeing a therapist, she asked me, but you're all right, aren't you? It was embarrassing for her, the idea that there was something wrong.
The
But she
stigma.
knew there was something wrong because, when I was a little kid, I was stealing chocolate from the candy store up the road, and I was getting into trouble. I was getting into fights all the time at school, out of school. I was constantly getting beaten up and beating up other kids, and I was clearly unhappy, and I had outbursts which no one could control. I was the difficult kid. Today, I would be diagnosed with attention deficit, but back then,
You were just a kid who.
I was just a messed up kid. Dad hired a psychologist, a Catholic psychologist, just to be sure, who told him, "Look, you need to spend more time with your son." And my dad said, "Mind your own damn business."
So he hired the therapist for himself to figure how to help you.
Well,
that's pretty great, instead of just getting someone for you to go see.
Yeah.
But he didn't want to go.
No. I was the one who saw the psychologist, but the psychologist told him to spend time with me. And then Dad said, "Mind your own damn business."
Isn't that interesting?
Yeah. So Mom, sorry, go on.
No, go ahead. So Mom
picked it up from there, and she decided that she would, well, she already was giving me the attention. She was very loving and she was caring, and she was also very frustrated by my behavior. She didn't understand it. And she was embarrassed when I was caught. I was caught stealing, shoplifting in a supermarket. They had a restaurant at this time. I was living in the restaurant with them. We had a whole kitchen full of cheese and all sorts of foods, and I was caught stealing cheese at the supermarket.
Locally in the same town where the restaurant was, so everybody knew your parents.
Around the corner. My father was known in the town, and it appeared in the newspaper. And that evening, the newspaper didn't show up at the door. Mysteriously disappeared.
I wonder who took that one.
So Dad went straight to the stationer's, and he bought another one, and he scoured it in a way he wouldn't probably have done if I'd left it alone. But he went through it page by page until he found the article.
So who was the disciplinarian in the family, I'm afraid to ask?
Oh, it was Dad. Yeah. He kept a very fine cane in his office on the wall, and he took it down very often. Once he chased my brother and I through the house with a broom. He was literally swinging this broom at us. He was a very frustrated person himself. He lost his father when he was young. I didn't know all this then. I made up all the excuses for him. I figured it out why he was like, but at the time, I was just simply terrified of him. That's all. That was my relationship with him as a kid.
Your mom, did she ever come and comfort you? It was the good cop, bad cop, or she didn't even go near any of it because she knew your dad would be furious.
She was comforting, but she didn't comfort me specifically in that way. No. And her phrase, the phrase which she repeated until the very last day of her life, "Never mind." It's a mantra for her. Never mind. And she'd smile. So I'd come in hurting and crying, and she'd say, "Never mind." And she'd put on some sort of distraction, give me something to eat, something like that. So she was comforting and she was caring, but she was afraid of him too. And she was angry at him too. And I think she never admitted this, but I think she was angry at herself for marrying someone so different and not realizing.
And yet there was an allure there that caught her initially. She was captivated.
He was a very good-looking man, very commanding. He was one of those people who everybody loved, except his family. He knew how to treat everybody and cultivate everyone's affections and interest them and excite them. But when it came to his family, I think he saw us mostly as a drag. We tied him down. We were an effort. He was resentful. And he certainly spoke to my mother in that way too, not just us. But he never touched her. He never beat her.
Oh, thank God. That's a good one, right?
Yeah.
Thank you.
The marriage wouldn't have survived that. She put up with a lot, but she wouldn't have put up with that. Yeah.
What would her life journey have been had she not married your father? She was an artist or performer. Would she have preferred to?
She spoke about the circus literally to the day she died. They were taking her to hospital. This was her last ambulance ride. And she was telling the ambulance driver all about her days in the circus. And before they got to the hospital, she went into a coma and she never spoke again. So
But she got to share her story one more time.
She shared them endlessly. And I think when she married Dad, that she was thinking, well, I'm marrying another circus performer. I'm going to be okay. But the war messed it all up.
Yeah, messed a lot of things up.
Say that again.
So how many siblings do you have?
3. There's 4 of us altogether.
And where are you in the order?
I'm number 3. Okay. I was supposed to be the last one. And then my sister was a surprise, my younger sister.
And did your parents treat you equally, or because you were the busiest or demanded more attention than the others, it was a different affection that they gave you, or lack of affection that they gave you?
Yeah, well, I was difficult. My other siblings, my older sister was also a little difficult. We're the closest, actually. But my other 2, my elder brother and my younger sister, they were very good. They were good children, very caring and obedient and all of that stuff. And I always resented that because that sort of exaggerated it. It was a greater contrast to show how uneasy I was.
Wow, that's really complicated then. So your mom, was she your inspiration? Was she your role model? Or was she a stepping stone because you never really knew what you wanted or had someone 100% there for you?
She was partly my role model, but my big role model was Dad, believe it or not. Despite the way I felt about him, despite the way he treated me, Mum was very busy in the restaurant too. Dad took her down. If you know anything about restaurant life, you know that you do not have a social life.
It's your life.
Yeah.
It's your life.
You work when everyone else is relaxing. Yeah. So I didn't see much of Mum or Dad when I was young. We rarely had meals together on Sundays most of the time, especially when I was very young. But we had a closet in the house with a big leather suitcase in it. And that suitcase was full of photographs, publicity shots, snapshots, all sorts of stuff. It was all black and white. This was all from before the war. And this was my role model. I saw pictures of Dad with the lions in his outfit, Mom doing her somersaults and bent over backwards and all this sort of stuff. And I just spent hours in there looking at it and fantasizing and imagining what my life was going to be like. And the one thing that I knew for sure was my life was not going to be conventional. And
because you thought that was so exciting, the images that you saw.
I thought that was exciting. And I also thought, well, that's what life is, you know, you live it, let's live it. And my parents were neither of them were educated, neither of them particularly valued education. Not that they devalued it, but to them it wasn't that important. The important thing was to live. So my childhood was not distracted by schoolwork, if you like. I always had this idea that, you know, life would, or at least should, be exciting.
If you had said, I'm going off to join the circus, what would they have said?
They would have been horrified.
Horrified. So they wanted the convention. I guess the restaurant was certainly more conventional than being in the circus, right?
Yeah.
And stability. And luckily, he was a success at it, your father and your mom.
Yeah. But I didn't say I was going off to join the circus, but I did say I'm going off to become a Buddhist monk. So
what kind of reaction did that get?
Mom was horrified. And Dad was he just sort of nodded his head and said, okay. He didn't like it. He didn't like it. but he had the sense to not try and stop me. Um, Mum said, we're going to lose him. And Dad said, it's okay, he'll be back. And he was right. And I thought I was going to be lost. I thought it was a one-way trip. That's the
But
way I
you were
planned
looking
it.
for a happiness, a simplicity, you were looking for peace in your life, right? Versus what was in the home or in your
Uh,
mind, peace in
yeah,
your mind.
I was looking for something, but more than that, I was leaving behind
That-
stuff, everything, my family, my education, everything. And I had no intention of going back. I was a very naive intention, but anyway, that's how I felt at the time.
Did you think that your parents didn't do enough for you? They weren't good enough for you? Or
Oh
that wasn't
no,
it?
no, I never thought that. I did ask my mother at one point, much later in life, why she didn't, how she couldn't protect me a little more from Dad. Um, and that put her in a state of mind I'd never seen before. She was angry at me for asking that. She was angry at herself. It put her in a real bind of guilt and frustration
Defensiveness,
and
maybe?
defensiveness. And yeah, it was
Wow.
really hard.
You're thinking you didn't do enough to protect me. And
Yeah,
she didn't, she thought that she had.
she thought she'd done what she could because she was
Yeah.
busy protecting herself.
Yeah.
You know?
I'm really happy that you had these conversations with her though,
Oh yeah, it's lovely.
later on in life.
Yeah, it was
How
very special.
wonderful.
She read the first draft of my memoir, uh, The Novice, Why I Became a Buddhist Monk. And she read the whole thing. It was a first draft, so it was long. It was I think about 120,000 words, much bigger than a regular book. But her first reaction, she read it in a day and a half, I think, almost nonstop. And her first reaction was, um, "Don't you think it would have been nice if we'd listened to you a little more when you were young?" And when she said that, I broke down. That was a big one. That was a very big one. And then in that moment, we became close in a way we'd never quite been since I was a little boy. Yeah, it was very
Wow,
special.
one question, one
Yeah.
sentence, your
Yeah.
life kind of
She was
changed.
acknowledging that, they could have done more. That's all I wanted to hear. I didn't know I wanted to hear that, but when I heard it,
Yeah, 8 years as a Buddhist monk, and then your mom says that one line to you, and you're like, okay, this is good. Oh my gosh, that's just magnificent. She had some real wisdom, your mom. I mean, she
she
had
did.
a big heart.
She did. She had a huge heart. She loved us. She cared for us. She wasn't educated. Um, she was not, she wasn't a great intellect, but she chose to become a Catholic. So when you choose a religion or a belief system like that, you do it much more deliberately and much more completely than when you're born into it, you know.
She was
So I
very
think
committed.
she's very committed, yeah. And I think that gave her the ability, first of all, to consider what it's like to not be a Catholic, because that's the way she grew up and she knew it wasn't so bad. But
What
also,
religion was she previously?
she was a
For
sort of a Methodist Protestant. It was a sort of a very, what's the word? A very sort of low level, very unintense
vague.
system,
Uh-huh.
you know. And she loved the intensity. And of course, this was before the Vatican Council of 1968. So it was still all in Latin. And she loved the mystery of it and the incense. And it's all very mysterious. So
Well,
that was,
that's what we're supposed to believe. All of that, right? It's all part of the spirit, the reincarnation. Everything is the whole, the bigger picture, not
yeah,
just what's in the Bible.
yeah, yeah.
When she was happy, would you know it? Did she used to dance around the house? Did she ever play with you guys? I mean, what was her fun or free side? Did you ever
Um,
see that?
she, yeah, They used to go, Mum and Dad used to take holidays in Italy, and a couple of times they took us along, or some of us, and she loved that. She loved being in Italy. I think that's why she married Dad, because he was Italian, more than because he was who he was.
That's a
You
good
know,
reason.
it's not about. She loved to sit in the field. She loved to sit in the vineyards and eat grapes, straight
Oh,
off the vine. She thought
oh,
that
they're
was great.
tart. Oh, that's so beautiful. That's
Mm,
wonderful.
yeah. She had friends. She had a great social circle. She was a very active member of the church. It wasn't just a matter of going to receive the sacrament. She took part in all sorts of organizations. St. Vincent de Paul, um, a charity organization. She helped people out, poor people. Um, in her later years, she used to drive little old ladies around until she became a little old lady, and other people used to drive her around.
Yeah, it's a
So
wonderful community, though. That's what keeps
it
people
can be.
alive and
Yeah, it
loved.
really can be.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Wow.
it
Oh my
can.
gosh, all this time we've neglected to mention your mom's name, Gwenda. Gwenda is like, or Gwendoline, or both.
Gwenda, she was, yeah, christened Gwendoline. She hated that, but she liked Gwenda. Yeah, nice name.
She
Yeah.
sounds really wonderful. I'm so glad we got to do this.
Yeah.
So I want to talk because I briefly mentioned once a monk, always a monk for you.
Yeah, that's actually true. That's the last thing my preceptor told me when I returned my vows, was the phrase.
Wow, really?
He says you can do it, but he's once a month, always a monk, and it's true. I still got
How could
that.
it not be touch your life?
Yeah.
I mean, that's a silly question. I guess I should ask you. It is it in you somewhere, some way, no matter what?
Oh yeah. Yeah. Well, I was in my 20s. I mean, it was 8 years from age 22 to 30. I
Mhm.
was celibate. I was I was dedicated. I mean,
That's
I intended to do it for the rest of my life. The reason I left is that's more complicated, and that's why I wrote the book. It was the right move. But at the time, yeah, that's what I did, and it stayed with me ever since, for sure. It's my way of being.
it's a
I gave
good
up
way.
everything to do it, and the things that I gave up, I never really regretted that. I gave up my education. I gave up a good career path. I gave up money in many ways. I've never really cared that much about money, and I've always lived hand to mouth. And that's worked for me. At least it worked until I met my wife, my present wife, and with her children. I had to settle down a little bit, become a bit more responsible, which was a good thing, but it happened late.
But you don't have to ever wholly lose those parts of you, hopefully, because that's who you are,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah,
When
and I teach mindfulness. I'm very much engaged with all of that. I didn't leave it behind. I left behind the Tibetan culture side of it, but I continued the inner work, and I learned to translate it into ordinary language instead of that very stilted Buddhist uh, vocabulary.
which I think can help many, many people because they may be intimidated because the
Yeah.
depth that you have to go. Are any of the monks still alive in your life? Do you
Oh
remain
yeah,
in touch with them?
very much so. Yeah, I'm still in touch with my Western monk friends.
Oh, that's
My
wonderful.
teachers and the Tibetan, they don't relate to me at all anymore. So that's much
Mm.
more distant. But the other Westerners that I was ordained with, yeah, I still see them every month. We meet individually, one on one, but I meet with each of them once a month
Oh, that's wonderful. That's
by
good.
Zoom. Well, I
Please
live
tell
in.
them we all say hello from should have listened to my
I
mother.
will. I live a very cloistered life because my wife, Caroline, she has MS, multiple sclerosis.
Oh dear.
And moving, getting out of the house is very difficult. It's very consuming. So we're pretty much housebound. So and she's a life coach. So our conversation centers very much on our work, and it's extremely rich and rewarding, and I have no regrets at all. It's a wonderful life.
It's so
But
important to have that,
cloistered.
in your partner, or
Yeah.
the conversations to have with your children.
Yeah.
It's meaningful, and that's what's important. It sounds cliche, but that's what matters in life.
Absolutely. You've got to have a purpose. It can't be just to survive. That's not enough.
Yeah.
You need something more.
So many wonderful stories. We're going to have
That's
to have
why
you
you're
back.
doing this, right?
I hope so. I
Yeah.
hope so. By sharing these stories, it just my heart and my mind are overwhelmed at times by all that I've heard. I mean, we're in our 6th season now, so some things never surprise me, and then sometimes I'm just like, oh wow. So there's a lot. But before we go, I want to make sure we have ways for people to find you. Your website is theinnermonk.com.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And then on Instagram, you're the Inner Monk. Facebook, Stephen. Oh, I'm going to spell your last name. Stephen is spelled with a Phen, and then Schettini, which I love, is SCHETT as in Tom, INI, Schettini. And all of this information will be in my show notes. And what else? We have LinkedIn, and you're on YouTube. If you look for the Inner Monk, you will find Stephen Schettini. Thank you for joining me. And Gwenda, I'll be thinking of you.
Oh, it's lovely. Thank you so much, Jackie. This was a real pleasure.
Thank you. And we'll be back next week with another episode of Should Have Listened to My Mother.